2017, Payless filed for bankruptcy. The headlines blamed Amazon, but a court-appointed expert would later conclude the company was already dead. 4 years earlier, its owners had pulled hundreds of millions of dollars out of it in debt-funded dividends, and the chain became insolvent the moment the checks cleared. A bankruptcy expert even named the 2 exact days it died. This wasn't a retail story, it was an autopsy. For most of America, Payless was just there. 4,000 stores, cheap shoes, the place you went for back-to-school sneakers, and a funeral pair you'd wear once. When it collapsed, the story wrote itself. Another brick-and-mortar chain killed by Amazon and the death of them all. It's a clean story. It's the one almost every outlet ran. It's also wrong. Or at least, it's the symptom, not the cause. Because the year Payless filed, its stores were still doing business. The patient was still breathing. To find what actually killed it, you don't look at Amazon. You look at the paperwork. In 2012, Payless was taken private by 2 investment firms, Golden Gate Capital and Blum Capital. The deal was big. They took Payless's parent company private in a transaction valued at around $2 billion, including debt. The tool they used is called a leveraged buyout. Here is the part most people don't realize about an LBO. When these firms buy a company, they don't mostly pay with their own money. They borrow and they put the debt on the company they're buying. So the company effectively takes out a loan to fund its own purchase. The new owners hold the keys, the company holds the bill. And here's the asymmetry that drives everything that follows. The owner's own money is only a sliver of the deal. Most of it is borrowed. So if they can pull cash back out fast enough, they can profit long before the bill ever comes due, even if the company itself doesn't survive. At first, Payless carried it. The debt was manageable, around $125 million. A real business can survive that. What it can't survive is what came next. In 2013 and again in 2014, the owners did something legal, common, and quietly lethal. It's called a dividend recapitalization. The company borrows more money, not to open stores, not to fix anything, but to pay a dividend straight to its owners. In 2013, according to the creditors committee, the company took on $225 million of new debt and handed it to its owners as a special dividend. In 2014, it happened again. Another $127 million out the door. Each payout carried fees on top, about $15 million in 2013, $14 million in 2014. More than $350 million combined to the firms that owned about 98% of the company. And the company's debt didn't grow a little, it more than tripled from around $125 million to over $400 million, and it kept climbing. By the time Payless filed for bankruptcy, the committee says its secured debt had reached $838 million, up from $382 million just after the buyout. In the committee's own words, the owners siphoned over $400 million out of the company. Now picture the math from Payless's side. Same stores, same sales. But the interest bill just exploded. Every dollar that used to remodel a store or lower a price now went to service debt the company took on to enrich the people who owned it. The business wasn't being run anymore. It was being drained. When Payless finally filed for bankruptcy in 2017, its creditors went looking for where the money went. The official creditors committee hired an expert in corporate solvency, Dr. Israel Sheikh, to answer one question. When exactly did this company become insolvent? His conclusion was precise and damning. Insolvent means something specific. The company owed more than it was worth, not just struggling, underwater. According to the committee's filing, Payless was rendered insolvent the very instant each dividend was paid. 2 dates, February 27, 2013, and March 10, 2014. 4 years before the bankruptcy, the headlines blamed on Amazon. An expert retained by Payless's own creditors put a time of death on the company. Twice. Payless had even appointed an independent director, Charles Cremins, to investigate what its owners had done. And when the creditors moved to sue, their draft complaint didn't soften it. Breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent transfers, illegal dividends. Allegations never tested at trial, but laid out in federal court in detail. This is the difference between a story and an autopsy. A story blames a trend. An autopsy names the day. So why does everyone still believe Amazon did it? Because the disguise is almost perfect. When a debt-loaded retailer finally buckles, what you see from the outside looks exactly like e-commerce disruption. Store closings, layoffs, liquidation sales. The financial engineering that set it up happened years earlier, in documents nobody reads, in transactions that are completely legal. A dividend recap doesn't make headlines. A closing down sale does, and think how convenient that is. The villain everyone already believed in, Amazon, was standing right there, ready to take the blame for a wound the company's own owners had opened years earlier. And there's a second layer to the mask. There really was an Amazon. E-commerce really was pressuring retail. That's what makes it work. The real trend gives the extraction a place to hide. Payless didn't have to be invincible. It just had to be healthy enough to survive the internet. And it might have been if it hadn't been bled first. So, follow the money to the end. The sponsors pulled out more than $350 million in dividends, while owning about 98% of the company. The creditors committee alleged the company had been looted into insolvency. The sponsors later settled those claims for $25 million, without admitting any wrongdoing of any kind. Sit with those two numbers. The creditors said the company was drained of more than $400 million. The claims against its owners were settled for $25 million. Payless filed for bankruptcy in 2017, restructured, and then, in 2019, collapsed a second time and liquidated, closing all of its U.S. stores. About 16,000 workers lost their jobs. Golden Gate and Bloom have denied wrongdoing, and a dividend recapitalization is, to be clear, perfectly legal. That's the uncomfortable part. Nothing here required a crime. Payless is not really a story about shoes or about Amazon. It's a story about a machine. One where a company can be bought with its own future, drained through its own balance sheet, and buried under a trend that takes the blame. And it isn't a one-off. The same blueprint shows up in the autopsies of Mervyn's, of Toys R Us, of Shopko. Different stores, same cause of death. So the next time a familiar store disappears and the obituary says killed by Amazon, ask the question the creditors asked. Not what was selling, who was taking. This was Payless, case file number 1.